Aish. Last year I was a student at Kwantlen Polytechnic University studying green business and sustainability management. This year I join you with a different capacity, but I'll get into that in a sec. Am I standing? Oh, I'm gonna go and sit down. Better. Yes. All right. Well, so second time around, everything is different but better, which is very interesting to me. So just a little bit of a recap on what I had observed and sort of made comments about last time, which was the need for greater youth inclusion in these conversations. Last year I think there was just a handful of us in the room, and I came in not really knowing much about the bioeconomy, and one of the first things that I noticed was like, where are the young people, because these are the people who are going to inherit all these problems that, Jeff and the gang have been going on about for about decades, and, so we kind of need to have that, and also upskilling opportunities. So last year, Ontario Genomics, there were other organizations that were here talking about how we couldn't really find the talent and, the need to upskill. So I've seen a lot more conversations this year with that, and also inclusivity of BIPOC youth and also newcomers in the space. And it's very interesting to see, like, the first session itself. Minister Isaiah, she started out her speech with intergenerational collaboration, which was very interesting, including youth and upskilling, as we mentioned 10 times at our panel since yesterday, which has been great. I am also very happy to see sorry, I'm just scrolling through my notes, just scribbled so many of them down. If you haven't looked at my doc, it is about 40 pages at this point. It was Minister and also Wendy L, just very our last panel that spoke about upskilling as well, which has been great. And then Indigenous youth also remain part of the key to us transitioning with our bioeconomy. And I have held off of on my introduction on what I'm doing this year precisely because of the kind of work I do right now, which is I work with Leading Change Canada, which is a youth capacity building organization, and we every year put up a summit and bring together 150 young people, young sustainability professionals from across Canada to come and tackle different sustainability challenges. So it happens every other year in Toronto or Vancouver. We're also the youth arm of the larger Globe Conference, and so we procure sponsorships to try and get young people in these spaces. And Jeff actually met me there when I was speaking and asking questions. And I'm very, very proud to be also joined by other Leading Change community members here with me. Ishwar Singh, who is the Executive Director of Clean Energy Dialogue, and also Vanessa Fiore, who is from University of Ottawa, and also fellow Leading Change delegate. Now, there's other things that I've also seen that are new to me this time around. If you all don't know, my background is finance and economics, and one of the things that was very exciting to hear yesterday was bioeconomy on the G7 agenda, with Canada being in leadership roles, because last year we were talking about national bioeconomy strategy. It's great to see that it's being pushed on the agendas more now. And also, it's very interesting because, again, last year it was a national bioeconomy strategy. This year I've heard about a low-carbon intensive, low-carbon economy strategy, which is, I feel, a lot more compelling, holistic approach as well. However, I am no expert. I work in programs and marketing. So it's very interesting, but we'll hear from some of our fellows over here in a bit. And so I am more of a finance person, and it's very interesting, to get data about the cost effectiveness of the low carbon fuels, especially with Fred's report this morning, and I think that's what we need to be driving. So that's been great to hear. So I'm gonna start the conversation with our panelists over here. So why don't you all, Ishwar and Vanessa, start by introducing yourselves, and also just maybe tell me a little bit about, what has been your aha moment, or like your big takeaways. I know aha moment is something Jeff likes to ask all the time, so yeah, tell me about that.
I guess I'll go first. My name is Ishwarjyot Singh, Ishwar for short. I'm the executive director of not Leading Change Canada, of Clean Energy Dialogues, or CED for short. What we do there is pretty much engage young people in the clean energy sector, right? We convene and upskill. We host a conference in Vancouver. It's our 3rd year running, where we connect young people to industry professionals and researchers all together so we can have some intergenerational collaboration and talk about innovative solutions in the clean energy sector, right? We focus on local struggles, local issues, and solutions based on where this conference is going to be held. Vancouver, very much clean energy there. Everything, majority of it is hydroelectricity, so we focus on that and remote areas, and we'll be expanding throughout Canada as well. But we also have a fellowship program that helps upskill youth from right when they graduate high school all the way up until they graduate from university, and pretty much create a pipeline straight into your companies. So that way you can see their growth throughout their entire university career, and eventually know that they have the skills ready for you for when you guys are hiring. But yeah, and then I'll pass it on to Vanessa.
Thank you. So, hi, my name is Vanessa. As Aish mentioned, I am a graduate from the University of Ottawa. It's just a 15-minute walk from here, in case you didn't know. I studied environmental science, and being at this conference is actually a pretty full circle moment for me, because while I was studying in my degree, I actually worked in the biogas industry quite a bit. So for about 3 years, 2 of those years I was trying to develop my own micro anaerobic digester, and then for 1 of those years I actually worked with a company called Regenerate Biogas based in Toronto, and they actually developed the ZooShare project, if anyone has heard of ZooShare before. So it's been a while since I've been involved in the industry, because since then, when I graduated in 2022, I worked about 1.5 years in electrification. I worked for a company that was based in Quebec, or that is based in Quebec, and I was working on medium and heavy duty electric vehicle manufacturing. And right now I'm sort of in a career transition. I'm currently at the Canadian Museum of Nature doing the operations of visit planning. But yeah, that's a bit about me. I've been a volunteer lobbyist with an organization called Citizens Climate Lobby Canada, and that's kind of how I met Jeff. But he was also at the Leading Change conference that the 3 of us met at, so I'm a little surprised that I didn't meet Jeff there, but I met him either way, so it's all right. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, Leading Change does tend to be the place where everybody gets scouted, so it's great. So big takeaways, aha moments, please.
Yeah, I feel like for me, for the biggest takeaway, I'm not too much invested in the bioeconomy, but I'm on the clean energy side of things. So the biggest thing that I've seen is I didn't know that there were lacking standards in this space. For me, I thought it was already a little bit more developed, especially learning in University of British Columbia, very much forestry there. So a lot of us are talking there about how are we going to implement the bioeconomy without talking about the standards. And it's nice to see that the CSA is starting to work on creating those standards nationally, but also so that we can access the global market on that side. So I think that's going to be the biggest kind of takeaway that I'm having here, is that finding regulations, finding standards, so that way we can collectively move forward in the bioeconomy and find funding for us.
Awesome. So for me, I kind of wrote down 2 major takeaways from the conference, one of which I believe the speakers did a really great job at communicating a lot of technical information, and for me it's actually debunked a couple of misconceptions that I had about the industry. Like I mentioned, I worked in biogas, and a lot of our feedstock comprised of animal waste from the zoo, but we also were working on food waste projects. For me, when it came to biofuels and a lot of the stuff I've heard about the feedstock related to biofuels, I was always under the misconception that there were land use changes that comprised of the agriculture needed to harvest the crops. So I thought that the GHG impact would have been a little bit higher. However, a lot of what we learned at the conference, that it was debunked because we learned a little bit about intermediate crops, for example, that only 5% of farmers in the US are utilizing, but that's a technology and a solution that exists to help increase revenue and also sequester carbon. And generally in agriculture, in a lot of these agricultural practices, a lot of the time carbon gets sequestered into the ground as you grow the crops, as was communicated throughout the conference. And also a little bit about the forestry industry as well. I come from a background of environmental advocacy, and the general public, as well as environmental advocates, when they hear about the forestry industry, they get kind of defensive and are very counter to deforestation. But I think a lot of the times people don't really realize the positive impacts of the forestry industry that were sort of discussed throughout the conference. For example, we learned that boreal forests are aging. A lot of the times we need forest fires or some sort of succession to take place in forests, in Canadian forests, in order to regenerate the forests. So that's something that can be done with the forestry industry, and that's something that they do. And it also helps to cut trees that already have carbon stored in them, which are live trees, as opposed to forest fires or other sort of mechanisms, which we learned. Another thing, generally, so we talked a lot about the international, national, and local interdisciplinary collaborations across sectors. We heard about COP30, we learned about what Canada, US, and Finland are doing to support the bioeconomy. We learned about Trois-Rivières, as well as Sarnia-Lambton and Ontario, in terms of how they're supporting the bioeconomy. And then we also learned about the private, public, and NGO sectors. But a lot of what we talked about involved market tools and landscapes to help scale up the industry to the potential that it can realize. So we talked about BDO zones to signal opportunities for biomass and biofuel development in certain areas, and some of which, that's lacking in Canada. We learned about the application and development of bioeconomy standards and the standardization of certain terms. And then we also learned about different types of regulations that can help sort of promote and incentivize the growth of the bioeconomy, whether it's the low carbon fuel standard, carbon markets and credits that we can use as pricing signals, and then also measuring carbon intensity. So those are sort of my big takeaways.
Very nice. I think for me, a really quick add-on. To me, I think the biggest aha moment or takeaway was the sort of the cost effectiveness of the low carbon economy. And so now that we can finally have that data to push this forward, Devin McCarthy, Chris Hessler, Michael McAdams yesterday talked about engaging the governments to sort of push this agenda forward. So I'm really excited to see how this angle is going to pan out in the next coming years with the new Trump administration and also potentially a conservative government here in Canada. Last question, what would you both like to see the next year at Scaling Up to move the needle forward?
Alrighty. At Scaling Up, as we're all youth up here, I'd love to see more of a presence of youth, but Jeff did a great job this year with all three of us, and there's been so many other youths throughout the 2 days that we were here. I'm not sure if you got to introduce yourself to them or they came up to you, but definitely an increased presence in the youth at this conference, because there are many, especially on the West Coast at the University of British Columbia. We have a program specifically dedicated to the bioeconomy. One of my vice chair over there standing, he just graduated from that program, and we are invested in the bioeconomy. So showing up in these spaces so that way we can get involved with you and show you new, cool, innovative ideas like we had with the BioInc over here as well. And one other thing I would like to see more of a kind of an outcome, I would say, next year as we have the G7 summit coming up soon. Hopefully we get the bioeconomy there and talking about the bioeconomy there within the G7 countries. Just because if we want to increase the bioeconomy and scale it up, we need to be at that forefront of these conversations. So definitely I think we need to be there. All of us should be there. We should find someone we need to be in those conversations. That's good for me. Good.
Yeah, to tag on to what Ishwar said, with youth presence, we talked a lot about, as I mentioned, sort of interdisciplinary knowledge in sectors, but I met Jeff because I was speaking on an intergenerational panel at a conference 2 months ago. So sort of tagging on to what Ishwar said about having more youth present, having more people from sort of different stages in their career would be really helpful. And sort of as I mentioned, I'm in a bit of a career transition myself. I have prior knowledge on the industry, and some of the panelists from before, like the minister of the Ontario government, for example, sort of talked about training to get into the industry. So maybe just elaborating a little bit more on how can we create professionals in this growing industry to really meet demands and have the necessary knowledge to apply. So one good conversation I had yesterday, actually, we were talking about carbon markets and how, because that's also so new and that's something that can really help incentivize the growth of the bioeconomy. It's getting more, not just youth, but not economists, scientists in general, to get more involved in the carbon market and sort of grow that. So that was one thing. And then I would also be interested next year in learning about the updates on standardization of terms in the bioeconomy, since that's sort of in the works right now. And then also more information about different types of feedstocks, because I feel like we talked a lot about crops. There was one presentation before that sort of compared the carbon intensity of crops versus UCOs, which is used oils. So maybe talking a little bit about different types of waste feedstock, because as I mentioned, when I was in the biogas industry, we were working with food waste. So talking about those different feedstocks and then making sure you're kind of seeing what their practical uses can be and ensuring that there is protection for agricultural and crop sort of feedstock as well.
Yeah. So hire Vanessa. And just last, my thoughts on how we can sort of scale this conversations up is just young people are a great tool to also amplify a lot of the messaging, the problems that you're trying to solve. It's the next generation that is going to inherit these problems, take them over. So again, if you're interested in connecting with me or with Ishwar, and really reaching a large audience of young people, Leading Change has an alumni community of 3,000 people, sustainability professionals, students, entrepreneurs. We do have our summit on February 10th, 2025 at Sheraton Center Hotel. I'd love to chat more and have you attend as well. And that is my cue. Jeff gets up. Thank you.